Hello everybody, my name is Ivan Ethos. Welcome back to Gaming with Spirit. Of course, I'm here, Ivan Ethos. And you might be really surprised as to why this stream is happening today. And I'll let you know that I was moderately surprised to find myself wanting to do a stream today. And that's not to say that I never want to do a stream again, or I'm having any kind of burnout from this. Far from it. Streaming is one of the few ways at which I, as a person with some, well, I would say mild ADHD and autism spectrum disorder issues, kind of helps me work through problems and find solutions and just generally have a good time, right? It helps me kind of just be normal, you could say, for a while. Which is what we all need, if we're being honest with ourselves. So, what am I doing here today? Well, the answer's pretty straightforward. My goal is primarily to just build my wall, and then, go out and do a bunch of harvesting for resources to get this wall, I wouldn't say finished today, but just looking a little bit straighter. And while I'm doing this, my secondary goal is to talk to you guys and kind of get you on board with what's going to be happening these next couple of weeks. Because there's going to be some, I wouldn't say significant changes, but there's going to be some changes that I want you all to be aware of before they start happening, right? So, first and foremost, I'm going to be heading to Hawaii for a trip. I will probably be gone for a few days, close to a week in total. And I'm hoping to stream while I am there, right? It might not be as good of quality as you've come to expect with my streams due to, various differences on resources and computers, but I'm going to try to make it work. In the meantime, I wanted to do a little bit extra to kind of give you guys a sense that I haven't forgotten about you, and Thursday, honestly, was a pure mistake on my part. Wednesday, I wasn't feeling super great, being a little bit ill, but then Thursday, Thursday, I had some stuff come up, and I also went to go pick up my daughter. So I wasn't able to actually do what I wanted to do, which was do my stream. Now, I guess the most important thing to start off with is after we get that all done, right? We're gonna talk a little bit about a debate, in a sense, that I had with some people the other day. And it's nothing too complicated, but I think it has, especially with today and how things have been going lately with people, I think it has some important messages to be sent out, right? So, first and foremost, one of the most important things I think we can all agree on is that, being honest with ourselves is incredibly important. And sometimes we don't know what that honesty actually is. We think we know what it is, we have an idea, we say we do, and then things change, right? A lot of what comes down in this world is a matter of perspective. If you perceive something to be something, then that's how it is for you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's, oops, wrong button. Nothing wrong with that, it's just how it is. Now, I bring this up specifically to talk about things that many people would consider to be, what's the word? Clear. They see something, they say there's an obvious truth, answer, or lie here, and they move on. Right? If someone's a thief, someone's a thief. If someone's a murderer, someone's a murderer. And I think for the most part, those do hold a lot of weight, especially when it comes to first impressions. Now, if you get to know someone and then you find out down the road that they have, a criminal record or other things, it's understandable that you may have a different opinion from everybody else. And again, I personally think it's fine to have, you know, a different opinion if you know someone, because you literally know more about that person than someone who just reads, you know, a blurb or a report. This is why you see those kind of situations pop up with, you know, people saying, "I can't believe he would do this." Yeah, it's true, and it's fair. But we also have to take into consideration everything else that happens, right? Not because it's important for us as individuals as much as it's just important for everybody in the involved area. So, this actually came out primarily due to a personal reason, which I won't get into. But I will get into the specifics kind of on another issue that I discussed with some friends revolving around religion. Because religion tends to be a fairly easy topic to discuss when it comes to these matters. So, it looks so... I need to fix this. So, most people would not say that religion is straightforward or easy to understand, and I think they would be pretty much right about that. Depending on the kind of religion you're following. And there's always going to be some small changes here and there for every religion, right? Maybe I should keep that ledge. I'm going to keep that ledge, actually. I am going to fix this little spot here, but I'm going to keep the ledge. I think the ledge actually looks good. So, often when you are in a religious circumstance, people tell you that, you have to do A, B, and C, because that's what your book, holy book or otherwise, says you should do. Turn the other cheek, for example, is one of the most common ones you hear with people who follow Abrahamic or Christian religions. That also kind of talk a little bit about no, that's fine. That's also what people talk about when they refer to like Muslim faiths and stuff like that. They follow a similar family, even if they're not the same, right? And I bring this up to say that it doesn't mean that these are all wrong or they need to reassess their whole values. No. I'm just saying that generally speaking, turn the other cheek is one of the first lessons you learn. Now, the question that was brought up by my friend group was, well, where do you stop, right? If you're gonna practice what you preach and you have to turn the other cheek, where do you stop with that? And that's an interesting question, because there's so much you can and can't do when it comes to giving people a pass, if that makes sense, right? Some people are just bad for themselves and others, and it's something that is hard to decide where that limit is. Now, personally for me, I think it's a matter of, almost risk assessment, right? If someone did something in a crime of passion, which is one of our very common legal standings, a crime of passion, and then they clearly, make amends for that, they spend a number of years getting better, I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt and allow, for some allowances there. And I might be in the minority who believe that. But a big part of the whole point of being evolved critters is that we have to be able to give people some benefit of the doubt. Otherwise, we are no better than animals. I'm not exactly sure which philosopher said it, or said it best. But one of them, I remember a quote being something like, the thing that sets the modern man apart from beasts is our ability to reason and rationalize, to accept and forgive. And that I thought was very profound and very valuable as a statement. And interestingly enough, especially with how things are going today, with it seems like every politician has their own idea of what everything and how everything's supposed to be organized, and they're basically just holding out for their own interests. I think it's important to discuss perspectives a little bit. So let's discuss perspectives. What is a perspective, first and foremost? Most people would say that a perspective is something of an opinion, right? You do something, it's an opinion, and that's a perspective. Congratulations. Pretty cut and simple. It is a personal opinion, maybe backed up by facts. And I'd agree with that. I would say that's pretty accurate to a perspective. I also would like to think that perspectives can be wrong without being wrong and right without being right, if that makes sense. So I went 1, 2, 3 over. Okay. 1, 2, 3 over. And then back. Should line up with this one. There we go. Nope, maybe I'm a little too close. I need like a... This is where mods would be really helpful to get like a precise line. No, it's not there. This one, it is adjacent. Okay. Anyways, so we look at things from a matter of a whole spectrum, right? If a person has an opinion, that opinion has to remain constant. And if that opinion remains constant, it's their perspective. I think that's also fairly accurate. It was actually 1 over? Oh, that's gross. There we go. But I think a lot of things can affect how people perceive the world. And honestly, it's such a large amount that it's hard to say for sure when a perspective is right or wrong. And I mean, that's one of the benefits of philosophy, right? We aren't really looking for what's right and wrong from a subjective mindset. We're looking from an objective one. And since there is no objective mind that can say for sure what's right or wrong or true or false, everything is an opinion. And I like that idea, because it gives us all the option to kind of like learn from our own mistakes, get better, and be, what we want to be. Now, again, I bring this up because when you discuss, say things like the war in Iran, or ICE in cities. Yeah, it's off again. Darn it. I'm going to have to figure out how to fix that. In the meantime, I'm going to go mining. But, when you discuss big political events like that, one of the things you'll kind of have to think about on top of all of that is what reasons are those things happening, right? Are the ones that we're being told through news sources, are they honest? Are they giving all the facts, or are they only telling you the facts that they think are going to best prove their case? Right? So there are people out there who will say that, oh, well, this needs to happen because of A, B, and C. And then there are same people could fire back and go, well, if A, B, and C are the reason why you're doing this, then what about, D and E and F that basically show that you're being, inconsiderate? And I think that's where we should look at ourselves, because, we don't really know what started or will finish a war. We can guess, we can hypothesize, and try to plan and predict for it, but realistically, in the end, most of this stuff is way above our heads. And it's such a complicated situation that if you tried to boil it down to a few talking points, you'd probably lose most of your audience. So let's look at the basic ones, right? We could look at ideology differences, which would be kind of religious, or in some ways sociology, because you can definitely say that people of Iran don't live the same way that we do. And that's just because of how their politics and their society is structured. So there's a lot of different reasons as to why we could be having a war, right? But then, what's the point? What's the point of a war when it doesn't seem to be benefiting anyone? Gas prices are getting crazy. We have this whole situation with, you know, I think California reported like $10 gas prices or something crazy like that. And yeah, it's like, that's absolutely bonkers. Why would you... Oh, hold up. I don't want that. I want to make it straight here. Okay. So, like, why would you want that kind of gas price? That doesn't seem like it makes sense. There must be a better reason than, you know, politics or social reasons as to why we're going to war. Otherwise, you know, no company would want gas prices to be that high, right? I would say yes, they do. I mean, after all, that's how they got us to the gas prices we are today. Several years back, if you look at what gas prices were, they weren't anywhere near where they are now. They were $2. They were under $2, or they were at $2, and it was a series of mistakes from gas companies having oil spills and other major issues that actually led us to where we are with the $3 plus gas prices, which they said once they cleaned up everything would go down. But when people realized, most of the companies realized, that people were more than, I wouldn't say happy, but they were going to still pay those prices because they had stuff to do, well, profit, right? One of my favorite YouTube creators actually talks a little bit about how America has 100% replaced the concept of happiness in some ways with productivity, where all we really do is just try our best to make money, and that's really all that happens. And however unfortunate it is for us these days, you know, many of us look at the pumps and we would be happy to have a $3 gas price again, because everything's getting close to $4, $5, which again, I think in itself proves a point. Even if this war is pointless to most people, to the gas companies it's an opportunity. Even if prices go up right now, they still have an opportunity to make people pay more long term, because to most people, they're not going to think of, oh, hey, you know, gas prices can go back to normal now that the oil price has gone down. They're going to be like, well, the war is over, right? The war is over. And gas prices will stabilize now that the war is over. And gas companies will be like, oh yeah, we'll get on that, and they'll start to lower the price, a few cents here, a few cents there, finding out where people are happy with it and where people aren't. Because if they find that people are willing to pay, you know, only a couple cents less, and they can keep those prices at $3.89, even though they weren't there before the war, but they were there after the war, they're more than happy to do that, because that's just more profit in their pocket. Now, is this to say, is this some type of grand scheme by gas companies to make extra money, and the whole war was just that? That would be paranoid thinking. I don't think that's the case. But it does show that it's not just, you know, the obvious answer why something could be actually good, at least for certain people when it's bad for everybody else. And like I said, that's where I would like to start today's kind of discussion. These won't be common, I'll admit. I don't plan on making my streams or my, or anything else be kind of a big political battle or whatnot. I felt like today, while I peruse the various different structures and figure things out here for the next hour or so, that I'm just going to kind of ramble on about a topic that I think is kind of interesting. And unfortunately, for most of you, that topic is 100% going to be about, well, the oddities of perspective. So, most people, and I like to think that, we are thinking rational human beings, will consider that the world isn't black and white. It's a good place to be. It's a good ideology to hold. And they're correct. The world isn't black and white. It's several different shades of gray, has a lot of nuance to it, and a lot of it comes down to what you personally believe, which takes us back to what I talked about religion and all that other stuff. Because if you can personally believe something that isn't quite true, well, you've basically already won, in a sense. Because you can, I wouldn't say compromise, but you could definitely explain away a lot of problems in your life by just saying, oh, well, I don't have control over that thing. And you're right. You don't really have control over that thing, but at the same time, you have absolutely control over your own life. And even if the choices that could be made about that thing, which you don't want to deal with, might be harsh, it's still within your power. And again, I'm not pointing any specific fingers here or doing anything like that. I'm just saying that when you talk to people, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, right, a lot of them will say, well, that's them. I don't believe that. It's like, okay, but you yourself voted for those people. Those people who right now you're saying don't represent you, but you still voted for them, right? You made that choice. And they will explain themselves 8 ways to Sunday about why they are right and, everything's fine. And that's their prerogative again. It's their perspective, right? Gosh darn it. But realistically speaking, as many other YouTube commenters and other social media personalities have talked about, just because you change your mind when things really start getting crappy doesn't automatically give you a pass for your poor behavior in the past. It means we're still going to look at you and go, okay, how much of this is you seeing a sinking ship and how much of this is you actually changing? In that same light, there's a very interesting little scientific thing that I think a lot of people may kind of sort of know, but don't really think about day to day, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to. But every 7 years, according to science, and this might be a little inaccurate based on people and individuals, but every 7 years, our skeleton completely gets replaced, right? And nearly daily, do we experience a change in our cells, skin structure? Hair obviously takes time to grow, but it's just dead cells. So you could say that every 7 years, people are different people. Because within that 7 years, most of the cells in their body have completely undergone changes, or even been replaced. And on top of that, one would hope that within 7 years, people have learned lessons from previous things and have grown as people from their mistakes. It's not a guarantee, but it's something to think about. So now if someone did something within a year or 2 years, you could say, oh yeah, this is definitely something to watch out for. 7 years? Maybe something to start thinking about. And that's what brings us into, like, the political situation we find ourselves in as a general whole. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on or what you're talking about. Many of these politicians have been doing stuff for decades to enrich themselves. Oopsie. I wanted to delete that one. So they've been doing this for decades to enrich themselves. And to make matters worse, not only have they been enriching themselves, but you haven't really seen a whole lot of movement in change. So even after 7 years, if we use that as a meter, they still probably are facing an issue of these are people who we shouldn't trust all that much. Because you see the same thing repeating over and over. And we all know that forgetting history makes it repeat even worse. So here we have people in positions of great power constantly making similar mistakes. And our response to it is, oh, well, we the people can change this. And like you, I thoroughly believe that is the case. We have the ability and the potential to make changes for the betterment of our society. But the problem is, we have to be willing to take a stand somewhere. And it's not an easy stand to make when all your life, other people were making that stand. But this goes beyond just stances, if you think about it. Most people these days aren't really part of any, I wouldn't call it radical, but like big social movements. Like they might join a protest, and awesome if they do. They're showing their support for various causes, which I think is very important. But not many of them... Why am I going that way? I'm pointing... Hold up. Why am I... That was really weird. Is my keyboard dying? I just suddenly could not turn the direction I want to turn. Okay. So, they just haven't really been through the same level of stress and struggle and turmoil that older generations have been. And I'm not talking about millennials. I'm actually talking about boomers. People probably who go even further back, really. People who went through civil rights, World War I, II, stuff like that, the Vietnam War, the Korean War. There was a lot of social things that happened around that time because, let's face it, there were huge protest movements that literally caused a war to end. I believe that was the Vietnam War. I could be wrong. It's been a bit. But so let's say it was the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War ended because of peaceful protests of massive proportions. And if it wasn't, it was the Korean War, and I apologize. I think it might have been both. Anyways, so we talk about these major changes where people obviously had the power to change what the government was doing simply by sheer numbers. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen, in a week. It took a long time for the pressure to build to a point where even the politicians were like, okay, we need to get ahead of this because this is causing too many disruptions in A, B, C, or whatever they were having their problems with, right? So, this is something that is doable, and it's great that that was something that we were able to do as citizens of our country because it proves a point that we do have power over what occurs in our life. Real political power. Not just us being told, oh, you can do things as long as you follow the law, right? It's not these almost juvenile propaganda posts about how, the world is the Democratic Republic of the United States will always follow its people and all that other stuff, which is, I wouldn't say a lie, exactly. It just misinterprets the truth. And that truth is everyone's weight in this country is a little different. And I don't mean your physical weight, so get your mind off that. I'm talking more about metaphorical weight, political weight, social weight, and so much more. For example, if you are a pillar of a community, you're less likely for people to take seriously threats, right? Or they're more likely to be serious about threats against you, less likely to hear things like, you're a horrible human being and you suck. They'd be like, well, why did this person suck? Well, they did this, and that's like, okay, that might be morally gray, but we're not gonna, that's not a big deal. Is kind of how they look at it, because this person has proven that they are, an important part of the community, and without them, things just wouldn't work the same. Now, in medieval times, we would call this a vested interest. So vested interests still exist, of course. We just call them usually different names, usually companies. And these vested interests are, well, they're vested in making sure things roughly stay the same. That people stay happy-ish, buy their products, move on with their lives, have kids who can be new consumers of products, and so on. Now, on a surface level, that's not really a problem, because obviously we want that to occur to some degree anyways. But on a deeper level, it's a pretty serious problem we have to deal with. Because most often, these companies do not have our best interests in mind. Their perspective definitely doesn't align with our own, which is, we want, to have a living wage. We want to be able to, go on vacations and not feel like we're abandoning our coworkers at work because our boss doesn't want to have to pay people overtime, or whatever it might be that ends up being the kicker, right? For what we believe to be correct and worthy and just causes and all those other things. So, like, with those perspectives being very different between what the common man believes, woman, child believes to be what we need in this world, versus what the companies believe we need in this world, which is usually just to be quiet and buy stuff. This is where perspectives really start taking an important role in our day-to-day lives. I don't remember who said it. I know my mom told me this when I was younger, that you vote with your money, right? So if you want people to make changes, then you vote with your money. You walk around and you say, I'm not going to buy from this company because this company does not do the things that I believe are correct. And providing that they care, right? Providing that they care, you get what you want. Eventually the company realizes with enough people, enough people who care, and that they're going to have to change things. Or they're just going to have to take the hit and the loss. I don't know many companies that actively have seen what people disliked about their policies and decided, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. It seems to be kind of a rare mindset for people. But Chick-fil-A was one that suffered a little bit because I don't remember what exactly happened, and I probably shouldn't speak too deeply on it, of course. But they basically came out, a spokesperson came out against, I think it was gay rights or trans rights, or one of the two. Right? Basically, the civil liberties that we all believe that each person should have access to. And they were basically saying that they didn't believe in those things. And I mean, like I said earlier, that is their right, in a sense, as an individual. It's not necessarily their right as a company, though. Because a company is supposed to, for better or worse, provide a service to its customers. Now, that service should be devoid of politics as much as possible, in my personal opinion. And I know that personal opinion will not be shared by everyone, but will probably be shared by quite a few. So what do I mean by devoid of politics? So if you go to McDonald's and you buy a cheeseburger, the most political that cheeseburger should be about is whether or not, it's made from animals that got to run around in free range, or animals that got to, or didn't get to do that, right? Like that should be the entirety of the question. Is this burger a happy cow? Is this burger not a happy cow? That should be the only question you have when you eat that burger. Unfortunately, that's not the case most of the time. Most of the time, it's also a question of what workers they have working on those farms, and even beyond that, what their spokespeople are discussing, and what they are saying is right or wrong, and it just keeps getting more and more complicated as time progresses. Because companies long ago realized that if they want to stay in power to some degree, they have to be willing to bend some things and take some steps that we nowadays would see as pretty bad, but we don't even think about it now because, well, one of the worst things that the American government has ever allowed, which is lobbying. Lobby groups tend to skew political opinion in sessions of Congress, and they are special groups. So they're looking for a specific kind of outcome that probably doesn't revolve around whatever the state legislature wants. So if you are someone who lives in Minnesota, you're going to vote for someone who, is dealing with the problems that Minnesota has. These problems can be a lot of things, but generally speaking, if you know that they're going to address the problems that Minnesota has, you're like, okay, I'm going to vote for this person, right? And then you turn around and it turns out because of a lobby group, they went completely against what everybody wanted them to do. They go, well, these guys had a very good point. It will greatly ruin the economic strength of our state by doing this bill. Or they'll pass it off as like, oh, well, if we want to see further growth and really improve our state's, economy, we need to give a little here and we'll get a lot more later. And I'm not a big fan of that, because it's really easy to excuse your actions in those settings, even though there is no excuse for your actions in those settings. And people will hear what you say, and they're like, well, I voted for him, or her, or whatever, and I believe that they're gonna do the right thing, right? So we assume, because we voted for them when they were talking sense, that that's what's going to end up happening. They're going to do the right thing for our country or our state, and in the end, they do what they get either pressured into by lobbying groups or what they feel is better for them personally. And it doesn't go well for anybody. And that's why we get bills that don't make a whole lot of sense. And there's a whole lot of politics around these bills that contain 101 different, smaller bills inside of one giant bill. So you're looking at this bill and you're like, okay, so where is the clause that was supposed to be about, like, I don't know, relaxing taxation on people with incomes under a certain threshold? Oh, it's somewhere in page 37 under this dictate, under this thing, and then you'll find it if you dig deep enough. And it's like, wow, why is this bill so complicated? Why does it have to be so complicated? And they go, well, the law isn't simple. And what they mean to say is that they've been pressured from by one group or another to play ball so that they can get something else passed. Maybe that they think is more important to pass. Maybe something that they think is, like, something that their people who voted for them actually want. It's a question. We can't even know the answer to it, because in many ways, they don't even know the answer themselves. Now, in a perfect world, every bill would be a single written bill that no one would be able to like add in extra clauses here, there, or do backroom dealings in. And in the long haul, the world would be a better place because we would be able to read the bill and go, okay, this is very clearly a bill about civil liberties. We all agree with these civil liberties. Moving on, right, to the next bill that talks about something else. It would be very clear language and would make sense. Sadly, whether intentionally or otherwise, they don't do that. And instead we're stuck with these bills that are 1,000-page documents that if you want to find the one little thing that's actually really crummy in it, you have to dig through several different pages. I'm not a big fan of that, especially when, like I said before, perspective makes a whole lot of things different. So this is an inverted, that's outverted. Okay. That's a 1. Is that 2? Yeah, this is 1, that's 2. Interesting. Okay. I kind of like this pattern a little better. I'll have to probably go through and re-edit one of these sections, but still. So my ranting and rambling is just going to continue, of course. For me, it's just a matter of having something to do while I create. But I do think it's an important thing to think about. And I know that other online creators, especially political commentators, have made points about how single-issue bills would make a huge improvement to just the transparency of the government, right? I did. As I fell. So, like, that would be a nice thing to see. And I think the people who are anti-lobby is also probably a very good thing. We don't need a whole bunch of specialized groups all jockeying for a position of who gets to talk. I mean, it would be nice if in theory they were open forums that anyone could sit down and go, hey, I'm a concerned citizen from Kentucky. And I believe that the people of Kentucky would like to see this. And I've been empowered by the people of Kentucky to talk about it. Great. But we shouldn't need that if the senators and representatives from Kentucky are doing their jobs. Because they should be discussing what is going on in Kentucky in the first place. If they're not, well, then why do we need a lobbying group in the first place? That's just fire the person who's not doing their job and hire someone who will do the job correctly, right? That's the general theme of this. So if you, in theory, if you have a person who's not following what they were hired to do in most jobs, they get fired and replaced. Only in government is that not the case, where if a person can do basically a terrible job and the only thing that can really get them replaced is a special session of, the legislature or a revote. And some of those are complicated, some of those are really easy. It kind of comes down to the state's, constitution, things like that, which just makes it even more interesting to me that we can be in a position where if you go to your 9-to-5 job, right? You go to your 9-to-5 job and you're working there. Oh, this is not quite lined up. It's fine. If you go to your 9-to-5 job and you don't perform to expectations, usually you get a warning and or you get fired. Sometimes the warning doesn't happen and you just get fired. So, what's the criteria for being fired from a job? Not performing the duties of which you've been paid or hired to perform, right? But if you look at a lot of people in politics, they can have approval ratings ranging anywhere from high numbers, near 100% or 90s or 80%, or as low as 30%. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but I believe that if 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 someone is doing their job and barely a third of their state, the country likes the job they're doing, that sounds like if I was at a job, I would have been fired. But again, in politics, it's not the same. And that's again where we come back to perspectives. Because in our perspective, it's just not how things are done, even though it makes perfect sense logically that it should be. We don't hold politicians to the same standards of work ethic. Which, like I said, to me feels cheap, right? It feels like of all the people who should be expected to maintain, a level of appreciation and popularity in a job, politicians feel like they really should be. When politicians don't, it feels very unwieldy and unbalanced. And I think a lot of people dislike it as a general whole. And when you get a lot of people who disagree and dislike things, things start heating up. Not just politically, but just in general. Anger, frustration. This is where a lot of poor decision making comes from, is from fear and anger. And we see it constantly in the last, year? People making very poor choices, whether it just be for themselves or for their families. I mean, I personally wouldn't want to be remembered as a person who shot another human being for walking down the road or something. But yet, we now have multiple people, whether they've been identified or not, as ICE agents who just have killed people for being citizens, having concern and consideration. And generally speaking, we all dislike this. We don't find it to be something that represents us as a people, which is good. But we also feel very powerless against all of this as well. And that powerlessness is not going to be safe forever. When you feel powerless, like you feel like you don't have control over your own life or the things in your life, we start to lash out at things that we think we are safe to lash out about. This could be gas prices, this could be the No Kings rallies, this is all the stuff that in the end can mean a lot or mean nothing, depending on how well it's planned out and how well it plays out, right? Now, again, why is this important? Well, again, when people become heavily frustrated, history has shown time and time again that it makes things pretty unstable all around. Whether it be an economy, whether it be social issues, it just makes things unstable. And while that may not seem like a big deal, that takes time, things will adjust and adapt, and most people are right about that. There is one tiny problem that you run into. And that is, sometimes it's not the obvious things that people are going to blow up about. For example, in World War I, with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, right? A lot of people will say that's the reason why World War I happened. But there was a lot of other reasons that happened behind the scenes that we just didn't know about. And you only really learn about if you dig into the history a little deeper. And those are clearly issues that were present before his assassination. And that definitely did drive a lot of the rapid issues of World War I. So, if that's true, then we already have a lot of underlying issues in America right now that bring us pretty dangerously close to very unhappy people. Whether you be on the right or the left, you have to acknowledge that there are people out there who you would not want to be next to in a line because they would scare you with how aggressive they approach things. So, if we can acknowledge that, then there's a lot more instability in this country that is just beneath the surface. And for those who have never listened, I would highly recommend you listen to a podcast or YouTuber who does a breakdown of society's rise and falls called the Fall of Civilization podcast. I know, a little on the nose, but still, I would recommend it. And the reason why is pretty simple. The Fall of Civilizations podcast goes over the same kind of stuff I'm discussing right now. A lot of internal social issues that most people individually would pass off as this is no big deal. This is just one thing out of hundreds or thousands that are problems. Yes, but every single one of those eventually builds up to a point where someone's going to make a choice. And while those choices might be their own personal choices, the ripple effects from those choices are going to be staggering. You don't know what's going to end up happening when someone finally snaps. I've had a few friends who I would say are some of the calmest and kindest people I've known. And someone said something that set them off, truly set them off. And these are people with an incredible amount of patience and care, whether they worked in special education or not, didn't matter. Like they were thoughtful people. And I kid you not that they were some of the most terrifying people to see just lose their minds. And you're not really sure what caused it until you talk to them later and you really get a handle on what was going on in their head. And it seems like, especially at the time, such a simple thing to blow up about. But to them, it meant a lot more because that was something they never really talked about or shared. And again, it comes down to perspectives. You never thought to ask them about maybe why they always wash their hands twice instead of just once. You never thought to ask, why they wear a certain hat or shirt, or why they keep a certain trinket in their car. It seems like such a small little detail until it's not. And honestly, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we can take away from this rambling of mine, is that it's not about the big picture. The big picture happens because the small picture keeps going. And sometimes that small picture is just some people who make a really poor decision in the heat of a moment. And the consequences ripple out for generations afterwards. Pretty sure the people who, went and did what they did during the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand didn't think it was going to be anything more than maybe a civil war. Maybe it was some grand conspiracy. It's hard to say, right? But the very fact that we don't know what they were thinking, and now we sit here and we look at all the stuff that has happened because of World War I, we can look back and go, wow, that one event changed so much. And all the little background things changed so much. So then the question's asked, right? Does it matter now? Personally, I think it does. It's hard to imagine that what we're living through today isn't at some point going to be in the history books. And it's how those history books are written, the perspective of those history books, that's going to change how people see what has happened in these recent years. Are they going to see it as these crazy people who didn't pay attention and didn't utilize the resources they had available to them to stop all these catastrophes from happening? Or are they going to see it more as, it was the rise and fall of American fascism or imperialism, or this is the start of the great American empire? Who knows? Because that's going to be decades in the future when people look back on us and go, what happened there? Also, my lord, am I picking up stone fast? So, that's one of the reasons why I decided to discuss this. I mean, yeah, there was a personal note to it to some degree as well. But I honestly do believe that when you look at how things are happening and we don't take into consideration smaller details as well, we don't get to see the whole picture. And that picture is so very important to some people. Because if you knew the full picture, you may not have the same opinions you have now. It's easy to fear that which you don't know. The Romans did this very, very well, actually, back when they were starting their own wars. So the Romans, they knew it was harder to get their soldiers to attack someone who they could see as a mother or a father or a countryman. So they always branded their enemies as barbarians, heathens, unenlightened. I think that's even where the word gull comes from, is a form of barbarian. So, if you are constantly told something, this person or this group or this thing is bad, and you just take it without taking into consideration anything else, you don't really see why it's bad. You just are told it's bad, and then you have a bias against it. But without context to that bias, there's really nothing that you've gained. There you can't draw your own conclusions and therefore have a better handle on yourself as a human being or a person. Instead, you just listen to what other people say, and the next thing you know, that's all you really know how to do. Listen to what other people say. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen to the people you trust. No, right? We grow to trust people. We have to offer trust first, and then as consistency and time and, all that shows, we eventually learn to trust that person almost implicitly over time. But it's also a matter that sometimes, even the people you trust the most, you have to look at them and go, are you sure that this is real? This is true? This is right? Because if you're always told, for example, that cheese tastes terrible, which, heaven forbid, anyone should ever say cheese tastes terrible. I know there are people who are lactose intolerant that will still pump themselves full of medication to eat cheese. And I get it, food is not for everybody. But still, cheese. Then you'll never experience different kinds of cheese. And you might find out that you are missed an opportunity to try something that you actually really, really enjoy. Because you didn't give it the chance that you could have given it. This holds true with religions. This holds true with jobs. This holds true with foods. I mean, I know I don't like tomatoes all that often, but heaven forbid, I've had some meals, sandwiches especially, where a fresh tomato tastes heavenly in there. But you wouldn't catch me dead eating cherry tomatoes most of the time in my food. But even I can acknowledge in certain cases, a fresh tomato tastes really nice. Same thing with salads. Lettuce is okay, but I'm not just going to sit there and eat a head of lettuce. But some lettuce, some croutons, a little Parmesan cheese. Oh, I'll eat that up. A nice sandwich with some, Serrano ham or something. Oh, forget about it. But when I was a kid, 11, 12 years old, my perspectives were really narrow. I walked around and I went to McDonald's and I wanted a cheeseburger without the burger, just cheese. I wanted a cheese sandwich. And I used to gag whenever I tasted what I thought was fat or grease on stuff. It was pretty bad. It honestly was pretty bad. And the only way I got over it was having my mom go, you have to try this because you're getting nothing else. And I thought she was the coolest human being on earth because she forced me to change my perspective. Now, to this day, her forcing me to eat, what was it? Oh, it's a shellfish, whose name I can't remember for some reason. But, a lot of people, scallops, there it is, scallops. Her requirement for me to she was putting scallops in all kinds of stir-fry dishes. I don't know why exactly, I think she just liked them, but the texture made me so unhappy. And I still to this day do not like scallops. And I very rarely eat shellfish because my father once cracked open a crab in front of me. And it was so disturbing. I got very sick to my stomach and threw up. So I still have that very strong childhood memory of that. But I got over my dislike of a lot of different fruits, vegetables, meats, carbs, different types of cheese, just because I was forced to give it a shot. Take a moment to not be myself and try to broaden my horizons. And I think it did a good thing. I mean, even to today, I still ask questions about, like, are you sure that's right? That doesn't sound right to me. And then I look it up, and it's right. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I wouldn't think that deer would lay on top of corpses or chew on ribs. Yeah, it's real. Because when you think about those kind of things, you're like, no, deer are cute, sweet animals that live in the forest and are, like, special. No, deer will 100% lay on the corpses of critters because they generate heat and will chew bones. It's unsettling. It's not something most people want to consider, but it's exactly what they do. Also, I'll make a quick point about the game. If I'm receiving like 4 or 5 stone per pickaxe swing, I think I should receive the same for granite, because this is kind of crazy how fast I reached over 1,000 stone, but I spent almost like twice, 3 times the amount of time to get the same amount of granite. If I combined all my different sessions of harvesting granite, I'd like an increase on the amount of granite I receive, please, personally. Anyways, so yeah, taking the time to not be yourself for a minute is a great way to expand your horizons. It's what a lot of actors actually do in order to get in the roles of various characters, especially when they're just learning. I have a few friends who are actors or theater kids and stuff like that, and the best of them are the ones who take the time to go, if I was a peasant farmer in the 1600s, what would I need to survive in the Midwest? And they write down a list of all the things that they would need. And I think to myself, which of these things could I honestly do myself? And they'll write that down, and they'll keep going, trying to get into the headspace of what a peasant in the 1600s would have had access to, foods. They would do their own little research about, like, historical gardening and stuff like that. And it's pretty cool. That's how I learned about Jerusalem artichokes, for example, which is a really interesting crop that used to be harvested for a winter vegetable. Great stuff. Grows like a weed, large amount of nutrition. You can never get rid of it once you plant it, but incredibly versatile for cooking. And you don't see it anymore because, lots of different reasons. Mostly because people just don't know it exists. So you have this vegetable that no one knows exists, and I learned about it from one of my theater friends when we were discussing the culture of bread and gardening and farming, and it gave me a whole new perspective on theater, because to me theater was just people pretending to be someone they're not. But after really talking to my theater friends, I realized that it was more about, if you want to play a role, there's a lot that you need to learn. It's not just about, like, what's my motivation and then putting a fancy accent on it. It's about trying to get into the headspace, the perspective of your character. Sometimes it's really easy because we have lots of resources And sometimes it's really hard, like trying to get into the mindset of Terminator. You know, it's a robot, it's a machine. It doesn't think the same way we do. So how are we going to give it a personality that we feel fits a machine while also making it, let's say, funny? It's not easy to do. I've seen people pull it off, though, and it was brilliant. But in order for you to do that, you have to be flexible with your perspectives. And by keeping a very rigid ideology of what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false, black and white, you quickly come to realize that you don't really have a large range. And that's not to say that you're not a good person or a bad person. It's just the fact that by limiting yourself so much and not giving things a chance, like, sure, don't jump into a volcano. Lava will melt you. But, like, going to walk near a volcanic flow, listening to the words of the experienced guides who, like, yeah, don't go any closer than that, you will probably melt your shoe soles. Okay. It's a smart idea. But, you know, maybe you want to toss a stick nearby to see if they're right that it would burst into flames in 2 seconds. So, I don't know. I guess what I'm really saying is take chances sometimes. Even if the chances seem outlandish, crazy, or just, like, downright dangerous. You don't have to go out and you know, do those dangerous things. But if you're gonna wonder if they're right to say, I don't know, ride a motorcycle without handlebars. God forbid why you do this, but I've known some people who are like, I can ride my bike with no handlebars. Why can't I ride my... There's a reason for that. But you know what I mean? Like, give it some thought. Look it up yourself. Do some research. You might not get the answer you're looking for. You might not get the answer you expect. But at the very least, you can say that I looked it up, I did it myself, and I made my own choice. Which is something a lot of people, I think, these days needs to start getting through their head, is that we're not limited by a yes or no, or right or wrong, or even a, you know, black and white answer. Sometimes the best answer is to take your time, think about it, and if someone tells you you need to make a choice right now, be like, I don't really. What I need to do right now is consider how this is going to affect me long term. You know, what kind of things I'm going to need to do to make this work for me. Take, like, moving. A great example of this is moving. If you're about to move to a new home, in a different state especially, it's a great example. What do you do when you are going to be traveling like 1,000 miles to a new place, new people who you don't know, with new thoughts, new feelings on how things should work? Pros and cons lists. Dig into the details. If people say don't live there, there's a lot of criminals, look at the crime rates. Look at the, you know, the police reports. You might find that the place that you are told not to go to because of all these negative factors might be one of the best places to go to, just because a lot of criminals don't, you know, commit crime where they live, even if that sounds dumb. That's kind of how they behave. So, once again, it comes down to perspectives, doing your research, giving some serious thought to things. And I think if we do this, we can go from being people who are just living every day, one day at a time, to being a truly united community with a lot of similar thoughts and feelings on stuff. Because perspectives, they're not one-way streets. If you have a strong enough perspective, you can make everything work together. And communities come together when they have like-minded, open-minded individuals. And the more open-minded and willing you are to accept people, help them out, or other things, the less conflict you end up having. If people feel like they can talk their mind and they're not going to get punished for it, if people feel like they have support from their communities, crime rates decrease. It's scientifically and statistically proven. So it all comes down to perspective, which I think is kind of a fascinating point. But I have reached near the end of my stream, so I'm going to go do a little bit of mining up at the mountain waypoint, and we'll be here for another 15-ish minutes, and then we're going to call it a day. Again, the most of this stream was just me ranting and raving about how people need to kind of think and do their own research, primarily because of I had some visitors the other day that didn't understand how quarrying stone works. They were under this interesting impression that what you needed to do was just go out there, hammer your hammers and some chisels into some rock, and shovel out pipestone. Which, if no one knows what pipestone is, I'd suggest giving it a look. But they were like, oh, I'm just going to go in for a day and get out some stone. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. You don't have power tools, you don't have excavators, and you can't even take them in there. You're going to need months to get stone out. Because that's the truth. But their perspective was, oh, if I can order the stone online, if my elders have had the stone in hand, it shouldn't be that hard to get, right? Very wrong. And because they didn't think too heavily about it, because they didn't do their research, because they didn't take the time, and they were kind of running out of time because they didn't take the time before they started running out of time, well, they weren't able to get what they wanted. They didn't have the money to buy the stone that they wanted. They didn't feel like it was they should buy the stone because it was special, and they never took the time to ask the couriers themselves what they thought about everything. People who have been doing it for 40 plus years and getting this stone out and selling it to people and trading it to people all across the country. The real experts, because they didn't take the time to, once again, do their research. Because their perspective was skewed. And I think I'll kind of leave it there with one final statement too. When you next time you think to yourself, oh, medieval peasants, must have been terrible being one of them, not having toilets or baths or whatever. Remember that many cities back in those days, and this included towns, were as self-sufficient as they could possibly be. They might not have had like metal for tools, but all of them had blacksmiths, tailors. They had people going out and foraging in the forest for food. They had farmers growing food. They had other farmers who were harvesting and growing meat, milk, and other kinds of products. If you walked into a medieval village, you could expect to get anything you could possibly need for your trips, travels, or just to live. That's how self-sufficient their communities were. Their mindsets were more about luxuries they could get from other places than necessities most of the time. It's not like our current modern mindset. Our perspective is too different. And too many people put that modern mindset into perspective when they do everything. Whether it be writing a story, whether it be, making an argument, especially when it concerns like old, outdated ideas and practices like Victorian era politics and stuff like that. So, thank you everybody so much for watching this episode. I know it's been short, I know it's been kind of out of normal, but I still appreciate those who show up for the streams when the streams lights come on, whenever they have them to come on. And I appreciate those who watch these videos in their spare time, just to kind of have something on even in the background, because it means a lot that I can share these feelings and thoughts and that they get out there and someone is going to hear them and go, he might be right, Or maybe they're going to be wrong and I'll get lots of comments in my comment section. Who knows? But anyways, thank you everybody so much for watching. If you like this and you aren't subscribed, please subscribe if you can. Follow and everything else. It's greatly appreciated. And until Wednesday at the latest, hopefully Tuesday next week though, I will see you all then.